Welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm Murdoch, and this is 5 Second Mecha, where I've got 5 seconds to give you the rundown on a mech. Today, we're looking at the Zeta Gundam. Ready? Go! It shoots, it flies, it's a transformer. It has range mode, and Ruluka flies it apart at the end of ZZ. If you like getting content like this from us here at Gunpla Network, please give us that thumbs up and ring that bell while I introduce a segue to... Today's sponsor is Canadian Gundam. Looking for that next kit or tool to complete your collection? Canadian Gundam's got you covered. With a vast selection of Gunpla, plamo kits, paints, and tools, you're sure to find what you're looking for. And then you have their flat rate shipping across North America and private warehouse options. But wait, there's more. Take advantage of the discount code Gunpla Network for 10% off your entire order at checkout. Hang on, what? That's probably the most condensed description ever and could easily be confused for Macross without the music. So let's back up a bit and actually take maybe a little bit more than 5 minutes on this one, okay? All right. We are indeed going to look at the MSZ-006 Zeta Gundam. And talking about what is probably my favorite mobile suit of all time is something I actually have a hard time doing in just 5 minutes. So I'll do my best to try and keep it concise, I promise. The Zeta Gundam stands at just shy of 20 meters tall and is actually longer in Wave Rider mode at 24.32 meters in length. Its wingspan stretches almost as wide at a smidgen over 18.6 meters across. Its Minovsky fusion reactor could output a bit better than 2 megawatts, and its many gimbaled thrusters and vernier motors gave it a maximum acceleration of 1.81 Gs. Because of its thruster arrangements, this machine, being one of the first third-generation mobile suits, could dance in space around just about everything that came before it, and held its own against subsequent higher-performing machines through two major conflicts back to back. Grandpa couldn't even pull that off. As for what the Zeta came armed with, well, first, we're gonna go with that bog standard Federation basic requirement of a set of dual 60mm Vulcan guns mounted in the head. AU saw the practicality, so they opted for them. Next, we have the forearm-mounted 2-tube grenade launchers. And as they're mounted on the Zeta's forearms, they're not accessible in Wave Rider mode, which I will go into detail about in a bit. The Zeta can also equip grappling wire launcher modules instead of grenade launchers if the pilot wishes to capture a machine rather than damage it. In the hip binders, the Zeta carries a pair of Blash XBG35/DU105 beam sabers. These have beam blade power rating of 0.65 megawatts and also double as beam guns in Wave Rider mode, where their output is doubled at 1.3 megawatts. Now for the bigger guns and the shield. The Zeta's signature beam rifle, the XBR M87A2, is a longer semi-automatic firing beam rifle operating on E-packs and capable of deploying a beam blade from the barrel for extra reach in close combat. The rifle is capable of being mounted to the Zeta's tail vernier in Wave Rider mode and being fired from that position. The Zeta's BFG, the FXA-03M2 Hyper Mega Launcher, was unofficially the start of a directed energy weapons power output race in the Universal Century, with this big gun having an output of 8.3 megawatts. It should be noted that it can do this because Anaheim did some R&D and made a more compact version of the generator powering the Hyakushiki's Mega Bazooka launcher. This cannon can also do the beam bayonet party trick and can be mounted to the Zeta's shield on the underside in Wave Rider mode. The Zeta comes with a rather unique shield. Some variant models include a pair of jet engines, but they all include a built-in grenade launcher to make up for the ones in the arms being inoperable in Wave Rider mode. This thing is built to absorb the heat of re-entry and act as the contact point for the shockwaves of this wave riding thing I keep talking about. I promise it'll make sense in a minute, okay? It really will. Other features are a few different flying armor parts that are both AUG and Caraba tested at different times over the Grips conflict, and what are essentially birdlime launchers. The Zeta also had one other fancy and no doubt expensive piece of kit installed, the biosensor. The biosensor was something akin to a Psychomu system, and could allow new type pilots to, and I quote, more easily interface with their mobile suit via mental commands. Or, in the hands of Camille Bidon, especially during a pivotal moment, what I like to call rage mode. So, what makes this Gundam special? We know it's got a new type space magic interface, which, that's cool. But what was that about it being a transformer? No, Starscream! I have Megatron on speed dial. Go away! I swear. Decepticons. Where was I? Oh yeah, transformation feature. So this Gundam was basically Genesis for this decade of the Universal Century. Anaheim had already been working on what it was going to use as a chassis for what is basically, but not quite, the Gundam Mark III. After having studied and reverse engineered one of the Gundam Mark II specimens brought in by Camille Bidon and Quattro from Green Noah. Camille had come up with ideas on what he wanted to upgrade his Gundam Mark II at the time with, and the Argama's chief mobile suit mechanic, Astonaj Meadows, gave it a once-over and gave the kid props for his designs based on inspiration from the Rick Diaz. One of the gimmicks was that the Zeta could transform into Wave Rider mode. And the theory is based on real physics. The idea is that the hypersonic craft, that's right, the Zeta is technically capable of flying at speeds of at least Mach 5 in atmosphere, uses the shockwaves being generated by their own flight as a lifting surface. So the phenomenon is known as compression lift. And when applied to the Zeta, it meant the machine could dump a lot of atmospheric re-entry heat out behind it before any heat sources could set into the wings, due to the delta shape of the wingspan. Points for real science and science fiction. And you need to work better. This machine in the right hands is a hit-and-run monster if you consider the applications, discounting the cantankerous, misunderstood teenagers piloting it. I could go on for hours here, but basically this is a Special Forces wet dream machine, even without the biosensor. AUG and Caraba knew it, the Federation understood, and the top brass were salivating over it. Which is why they made a lot of variants, okay? They spent a lot of money for Anaheim to figure out how they could make the transformation sequence more efficient, as virtually all mobile suits of this kind are at their most vulnerable in mid-transformation. And then so many different applications. Anaheim basically asked AUG and Caraba, and later the Federation, what they wanted, and each respectively just said yes. What were all those variants? Well, for starters, the Zeta Plus program existed. Pick a letter in the alphabet, any letter. And there's probably a Zeta Gundam variant that exists for it, tailored for some purpose. Last I looked, the farthest they'd gotten to was the Zeta Plus S type, and that thing was just... it was pretty wild. Amuro went through at least 2 different Zeta Gundams according to different sources, in the form of the Zeta Plus A1, and then a very high-speed version that was customized more to him, known as the Strike Zeta. The Methus was one of the more immediate attempts to capitalize on mobile suits having high-speed mobile armor modes, and it's worth noting that many of these successor and variant models weren't actually capable of atmospheric re-entry. That was a cost-saving measure. You also get the ZZ, or Double Zeta, in all of its chonky greatness, being derived from Zeta Nissan. Further down the line, you have the Delta and Delta Plus series, which is basically a marriage of Zeta inner workings and transformation gimmicks with Hyaku Shiki performance. On top of that, there was also the Riga Z and Riga Z Custom, which were attempts to try and make the Zeta just cheaper in one iteration, and where the brass wrote a blank check and said, "Make it pure performance" in the other. The final attempt at mass-producing the Zeta was the Roselle, which would be used in some capacity all the way into Universal Century's 2nd century as Op-4 machines to test the Formula 90 Gundams. The Zeta itself has gone through many people in its pilot seat. I'm not going to go through the entire list, we're just going to focus on the primary pilots. That list is pretty short. The 3 to pay attention to here are Camille Bidon himself, the fella responsible for designing the Zeta, Judo Ashita, who takes over piloting the Zeta at the start of the first Neo-Zeon War, and Ru Luca, Judo's love interest, who takes over piloting the Zeta primarily after delivering the ZZ to Judo for their team to use. Another particularly important note, the Zeta Gundam, and to a lesser extent, the Gundam Mark II and the Hyaku Shiki, are some of the very select few protagonist machines that survived through more than one major conflict. Okay? The Grips conflict, with the Zeta joining the fray mid-UC 0087, where the Aug and Karaba on the surface of Earth fought a campaign to stop and eventually crush the Titans, who had become the very fascists they were pledged to actually hunt. Don't hate me, Zeon supporters, it's just facts at this point. And the first Neo-Zeon War, as Haman Khan sought to take advantage of an exhausted Aug and disorganized Federation at the time to try and conquer the Earthsphere. That didn't go so well either. The Zeta would be wrecked in one of the final confrontations of the war in UC 0089, being crippled after getting one last potshot in to disable the mighty Quinn Mantha. Anaheim would restore this heroic machine one more time for the UC 100 celebration parade before it would be taken and, I would hope, put into a museum, as that's the last I've heard of what happened to this magnificent machine that changed mobile suit warfare forever. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one.